Okay.
How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Data Lab here on the Sports Affiliation. This is where the professor, John Bush, and I take you inside our little laboratory for fantasy football and break down some of the statistics to not hand you a winning hand for next year in fantasy football, but give you the data and the data glimpses you need to be a smarter fantasy football player. And Mr. Professor John Bush,
Mr.
it is
Professor. Yes.
getting to an exciting time of the year with free agency.
Yep.
And we're going to be talking so much about that. We did over on our sister podcast, The Science of Fantasy Football. But today, we're diving into tight ends.
Yeah, we have already done in the last ones the quarterbacks and the running backs. So you can look at what we said here. This is kind of top down, big level here, but this shows you through the consistency lens. And I'll define things here and we'll jump, Dennis, with this slide here. You hadn't seen this. This is a tight end career arc, 2015 to 2025. This is on the axis, the uh, COM data, and let me define counts over median. And how we determine that is we take our database from it's actually 2014 to 2025. And we figure out what number of fantasy points per game, which is weekly, uh, that what that number is. And that's tends to be what is known in stats as the median. 50% of the uh, data is above that line, 50% is below. So that's called the box. That's 50. That's the line there. This is the upper 25% is the boom. That's the top whisker. And the bottom is the bust. And that's the bottom whisker. And the most of the time, a lot of the players tend to be within the box. This is kind of a performance concept. It's called a box and whisker. And we love to hang with players that are booming for us, we hope weekly. We try to avoid the buzz players. And Dennis and I pull our hair, what little hair we have left, out every week during the main season, trying to, start sit players. And we're trying to start the boom players and sit the buzz players for the week here. But Dennis, this is showing tight ends. And starting with year one, this is their performance consistency. And right away, you see a very short box. That means a lot of the players are about 30%. So you can think of this as percent. So that's about 30% of 17 weeks. So what is that, about 5 weeks? Uh, Most players here are in this range. So that's not a lot of consistent weeks, right? We're talking 12 weeks that they're very inconsistent. And the best players, 25%, are all the way up to 70%. So we're talking the Kelseys of the world, the Bowers, those players tend to, be there, and not many of them as rookies. And then this is year two. Notice they start getting a little better, Dennis. Year three, four, five, six. Notice they almost spike. If you're a dynasty player for tight ends, they're spiking in year six. And that's what about that first contract is 5 to 6. And those that probably continue on in the NFL, they stay here, they drop a little bit. 8, then they spike at 9, then drop back to 10. But we kind of start getting a level here. The survivors are performing at about 60%. So about 60% of the weeks they're in the top, a lot of the better ones are in the better than 60% uh, above the calm value, and that's in the boom range here. So we're liking those players, but only about a fourth will be hanging in there. But notice even the whisker starts decaying. So there is a decay rate. Age does catch up with tight ends as well as all the other players. I showed you the career arc for running backs and quarterbacks in previous here, Dennis. So I'm going to stop here and let you kind of look at the career arc of tight ends.
So, first of all, when it comes to tight end, I tend to treat this position much different than any other position in fantasy football. And this chart tells me that I'm doing it right. Because when I look at this data, I'm very, very suspect of any rookie tight end. I don't care how great they are. Now, sometimes you get a nice price on a rookie tight end. And if you go into the season last year, I made the hypothesis last year that of the rookie tight ends, Tyler Warren could start the season strong and Colston Loveland could finish the season strong. So I had one team over an FPPC where I drafted both of them because they were both relatively cheap. Mm-hmm. And I was in good shape everywhere else. So I grabbed two tight ends and I rolled the dice on two rookie tight ends, which I've never done before. But generally speaking, my strategy at tight end, if I miss on the elite, I'm taking too late because then I'm going to be playing the streaming game to get up into the whisker on any given week.
You're looking for the boom.
I'm looking for the boom on any given week because I'm not likely to get that with I don't want ordinary. No. So if I have to settle for ordinary, I'm going to draft them late and I'm going to draft two. Or I'm going to use the waiver wire a lot to get the guys who I think might be the pickup for a few weeks. Right. And this data is saying that strategy probably is a good idea because look how ordinary everything gets in the boxes. We're talking under 0.5 until you
as a rookie,
get to year 4.
75% of them are below 3 weeks above median, which is, about 9 or 10 points, something like. So you're, it's lean, Dennis.
It's very lean. But
remember, this is 10 years.
Yes.
We've had 5, those dots represent outliers, and notice the most outliers occurred in the rookie year. We've got some superstars over the 10 years, 5 of them that have been above the whisker. They're super folks, but there's not many. Notice there's 1, year 2, and that's it. You don't see any more, that are just insane. The top whisker is at year 6, where almost every week they were above median. That's pretty good, Dennis. That if you're one of the 1 or 2 that's 90%, you're guaranteed. Yes. You're not even streaming at that point. That is such a rarity to grab that player. And notice at the top of the whisker, there's not a lot of those. And by year 10, we're down to 75%, which is not bad, but it's not perfect.
No, and the big key here is, and this shows up in the boxes versus the whiskers.
Yep.
If I look at my MVP data and I look at the typical top tight end, we're talking about 105 for an MVP. If I'm looking at the sixth best tight end, so in other words, you're still the upper half in your league. That sixth guy is at 55. That's a drop off of 50 points in MVP, which is huge.
That is huge.
You compare that to the elites at other positions.
Yeah.
And the drop off, I mean, yes, the drop off is still 30 to 40 points, but the resulting MVP, the number 6 running back, is still about a 115. The resulting wide receiver is still at about a 118.
Yep.
Versus number 6 tight end that's at 55.
Well, look at the length of the whisker.
Yes, that's the incredible part of this.
If I can find it, I will just let me find the running backs, Dennis, so people can see what we're discussing here. If I can find it. Here it is right here. Even in running backs, there's some long whiskers. But with running backs, it tends to be kind of 6. But what I like about year 10 running backs, and you're thinking, wow, what that means is there's the numbers. This is not showing the actual numbers, Dennis, because the numbers are declining over time.
Yes.
The actual numbers of running backs are very much declining over 10 years. Okay. The ones that are surviving because they're producing, right? The Frank Gores, the Peterson, they're just the outliers. And so they're going to be still earning a place. And like I said, if you tend to catch balls, you can extend your career. At least I've done some age data here. But take a look at something key. Look at rookie box top running backs, year 2. Look at 3, 4, 5. Look at where the box really significantly accelerates. It's not a 3-year breakout, Dennis. It's a 2-year breakout for running backs. Folks, look at this. And year 3, it actually declines just a tad. So it's the same. Okay. And only after that 5 to 6, and Dennis reminded me about getting that contract. Look at that.
Yep.
You get a little bit because you've eliminated the duds, and so the survivors are a little bit better. NFL knows that.
Yeah, the guys that are the lower MVPs, lower com data,
they're gone.
They're replaced.
Yeah,
they're second stringers unless they get
practice
an injury ahead of them
or whatever.
Yeah, that's fascinating data. Hop back to the tight ends, because I want to point out one other thing here that I look at when it comes to the tight end data. It's, yes, you want to live in the boom, you want to live in the whiskers, but what I don't want to live in is the second half of the box.
No.
Or, I don't want to live in the second half of the box or in the incredible bust side.
Right.
So when I look at that middle of the box,
right,
that's what I also am kind of visualizing in addition to the top of the box.
Yeah.
Because I want to see where those
Dennis, what
trend
I
lines
did
go
for folks is I just highlighted the median right there, because this does, I wasn't really focused, but the median, Dennis, is 1 week or
Yes.
10%.
Yes.
So 2 weeks.
10%. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't even want to be close to the median.
No.
You want to be,
I want to
here's
live
the
up. Yeah.
average is below two even. I mean,
No.
for rookies, Dennis, if you draft a rookie, if you don't think they're up here at least 50%, so at least 9 weeks, I'm not sure I would waste my draft capital when I think you've got some other choices that have a higher chance maybe at being at the 50%, give you, 8 weeks above median.
Yeah. And again, I'm looking at an MVP score of
Mhm.
over 60 to be even a viable starter for me at tight end.
Mhm.
And if I look at the guys, and this goes back, to their anybody who's active of, since 2020, and I look at who hit that mark and played more than 10 games, 10 or more games and hit that mark.
Right.
Your list is Jimmy Graham, Jordan Reed,
Yeah.
Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta. That's
Right.
four guys. That's it. And if I add in, the threshold of games at six, then I add Rob Gronkowski, Tyler Eifert, and Chiggy Okonkwo. That's it. That's the entire population of guys that would have been like primo tight ends to own in fantasy football. Uh, Harold Fannin, as great as he was a 50. Colston Loveland was a 50 last year.
Right.
They did not make that 60 or higher mark. So now, granted, second half of the season and down the stretch for the fantasy playoffs, Colston Loveland was helping you. He
Right.
was he was helping you win. But that's the rarity of rookies where I felt pretty good that we knew he'd be better in the second half of the season rather than first half.
Right.
And that was not more than a likelihood, though. It was not a slam dunk. Oh, this guy is going to be so great at the end of the year. But you had to get to the end of the year with
Yeah.
him because he gave you, 3-0-4 to start the season, and then missed a week, then bye week, then 3-5-6. Ugh, that's ugly. He did not have his first fantasy football significant game until week 9.
Right.
And I'm just glad I had said he's not bad for the second half of the season. And
Right.
I said that during draft season. But that was the rarity that I felt pretty confident that he would be better in the second half of the year to the point that he'd be a significant fantasy starter.
Right.
But boy, this rookie data shows you that it's very slim.
Yeah, but look at the 2 year bump versus the three. You don't see that with
Yes.
running backs.
No.
The running backs would be right here at
Yes.
above four, and here they're not. So tight ends from year 1 to 2, you cannot they are not going to behave like a running back. A
No.
running back can really ramp it up year 2. So if I'm a dynasty player, I think there's still meat on the bone after year 2 tight ends, Dennis. I think people may misjudge things and you might still be able to get a bargain. But with running backs, their year 2 is pretty much you're going to get year 3 about like year 2. So there's no, if you pay what you think, it's probably not, you're not going to get any more value. So I think if you're a dynasty player, you can use these arcs to kind of plot your strategy with the age of the target player that you're wanting to acquire a little bit. This gives you a thoughtful estimate of the best case scenario, right? Close to the ceiling. The whisker is kind of the ceiling. And so if I'm going to invest in a draft pick and whatnot, you can, and I haven't figured that, how to equate this to draft picks, but I need some interns, Dennis. But anyway, I'm going to leave with that, and I'm going to show you how I look at predictiveness from last year to this year. So I asked the question, Dennis, does what they did last year give me insight, and can I use that to predict this year, right? I'm predicting the future, right? It's not perfect, but there's a statistical approach to do that. I have the methods here, materials and methods. So I divide the tight ends by their year, right? Year one, year two, rookie, year two. Then I looked at the top five, the next five, those above 50%, counts above median, 30, and then below 30. So I had six slices, and I looked at that data from year 2014 to 25, and I plotted the metric, and surprisingly, or not, I guess, those that were in the top five tended to have a higher whisker and box than everybody else. So good last year is a good sign that they'll be good this year. And you're saying, what would this look like if that wasn't the case? If they were all the same boxes, Dennis, if they were all at the same level, then that would show there's no predictability, right? It would be like, well, you're wasting your time looking at last year's metrics. You better find some other something to predict. But everybody looks at last year. It's just, I think they overvalue that. And here's the next year, the next five, the next five, the next, and so forth. And you see a complete drop off, right? So if they sucked last year, Dennis, they're probably going to suck this year. But I will show you these outliers over 10 years. There's a few that have come out of nowhere. So it's not hopeless, but folks, we're talking a few, maybe 10 out of, I don't know, 110% maybe, rare, but it can happen. So anyway, I look at that. Then I look at the average COM in the groups, Dennis. So green last year, green this year, zero point 0.7 is their average. The yellow 0.6, so not too bad. Then drops 5, 4, 5, 3, 3, 1, 6. And you're saying, well, where's the difference? Well, you use something called analysis of variance. You don't have to worry about the stats. I did it for you. Long story short, this p-value is extremely uh, uh, low. What that means is the chance that this data is just random is no chance. That's what that p-value means. There is no chance this is fake. This is real. So that's good. And you would predict that, right? I mean, players are good players are good players. And so then I can compare each of these groups to each other and say, are the green last year as good as the yellow last year or not? In other words, can I distinguish and make a tier? I mean, it's a statistical way to make a tier. And look what happens. The green and the yellow last year, the top five and the next five, you should consider predicted this for the next year to be the same. So there's the advantage, Dennis, is people may overstate the green, the top five, and maybe underestimate the next five. So in the top 10 tight ends by COM, and of course, People don't have the calm data because that's Dennis and I, our secret data. But we know now we can look at the top 10 and pretty much judge them statistically. They're going to be the same. There's a little difference, but not much. And the stats say ignore that, Dennis. And that's the key for this. So we should be able to look at last year and probably in the next five. So 6 to 10 last year in calm, Dennis, probably are going to be some treats and bargains for us, especially if we could grab them as our second tight end. If we're looking at a tight end premium, if we grab two yellows as a streaming option, we may have a good season and save draft capital. If we do grab a green, you probably want to grab one of the yellows to go with it as well if you're going to invest in the green. But there's a couple ways to spin this strategy, Dennis, but I'll stop here and let you comment on that strategy and this data here.
There is quite a bit of variability at the
Well, look
tight
at the
end
whisker in
position.
the
Yeah.
box and
Yep. And the key is shopping in the right groups.
yeah,
So your first data tells us that year 4, I'm kind of, if a guy has been really good but not great through first 3 years, that he's got a chance of going up in
a
year
little
4.
bit. Yeah.
And here's an interesting guy who did that. Travis Kelce's MVP data: 44 as a rookie, 44 year 2, 75 year 3,
Yep.
and then 100 he became
Wow.
Travis Kelce.
Right.
And that is before we saw Patrick Mahomes. Then
Right.
add Patrick Mahomes, he goes up to 125,
There we
then a
go.
119, 160, 88. So
Whoop.
even there, he had one drop off,
Yeah.
then back up to 129.
Wow.
And now his last 3 seasons, 80, 63, 47.
Well, what he did after about year 4, Dennis, he lived in the whiskers for most of his
Yes,
career.
correct. So what that tells you is if I look at guys who are coming into year 4 this year, it's Dalton Kincaid.
Yes.
So Kincaid was a 35, a 10, and a 100.
Right.
And now he's going to be, I'd say I got a good chance of him being 80 or higher in MVP this year. So this data is very important for finding those guys. And
Right.
the data kind of gives you the population to go fishing in at tight end more than any other position.
Yeah.
And if we cannot get guys in the first 2 groups, so that's the top 10 from last year.
Yeah.
If we can't get one of those guys at an affordable price, we wait. And that's the key. But usually,
and if your diary, Dennis, and I haven't gone back to look at the com, but this data would even say theoretically, if you're a tight end whisperer and you live in the whiskers in the other groups, you could go down to 15 to 20. It's going to get real lean going past 20 to grab, some streamers, Dennis. I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend living here if you can. But if you can get one of these, then you better look at your data to see you're good at picking in the whisker or are you stuck in the box. And if you are stuck in the box, then I think you're going to have to push yourself to be in the top 10 column to, stream. You just need to look at your past performance.
Yeah, and there are some interesting guys who were able to make a big comeback in their career when they changed teams at tight end. Zach Ertz is one of them.
Yeah.
But what this data says is if you're going to go shopping for those guys,
Yeah.
expect to be disappointed more often than not.
Yeah.
And that's the understanding that you need to have going
Yeah.
in. I want one of those guys in the first two groups.
Yeah.
I want one of the top
and
10.
Dennis, if you do this further, I broke it down. What you saw before was last year to this year. Now I ask the question year one to year two to year three, three to four, four to five, five to six, six to seven. So I get in the green top five, I get by age. I call this age comp, and this is their performance. Look at the green, Dennis. Depending on the year, still the box top is superior to the next five. There's a couple years, especially rookie year and the deep year, but you start dropping, and then below that, Dennis, it gets,
Wow.
yeah, you just don't want to be fishing in this pool here. But notice the rookie year one to two. Look at the box. Rut row, you can be way down. So it tells me that year one to two with tight ends is one of the most craziest situations. And I've got this data for running backs, folks, quarterbacks, and WRs. I just can't explain what power this gives you. And no, I hadn't put it out there. This is secret stuff. And like I said, nobody's paying Dennis and I to give our secret stuff away. But I'm sharing because I'm probably too sweet. But folks, this would scare me if you've got some of these rookies to look at their year two rut row. Yes, they can be good, but boy, they can have a drop off. But look at year two to three, Dennis. Look at where the box ends up. One of the safest boxes, actually, until they can get their late contract way back here in their career. But right there. So you get in it. So if I'm a dynasty player, you know, just be aware that, you could get a surprise there. So anyway, Dennis, I calculate this data, the whisker and the box top, and I use that as a boundary to do my lollipop. So I'm going to move directly to the lollipop data, Dennis. This is three different metrics, including last year's COM, and then the year last year to this year's whisker top and box top. So I throw all that together in a lollipop graph, and we see the high, the low, and kind of the mid. And you can see the variation here and the expectation, the floor and ceiling now with tight ends. And Dennis, do you remember running back lollipops? Do you see the tight end and how long the stem is for the
Oh yeah.
lollipop?
Yep.
Way different. And let me try to find the running backs, Dennis, so we can compare. People say, oh, their running backs are the same as is. Here's running backs. Look at the stems. Not too long, are they?
No.
Yeah, look at and the tight ends row. So the running backs we covered last time, nothing like a tight end, Dennis, at all. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah, and here's the case where if you look at Trey McBride, for instance,
Yep. He could be the best.
there's
He could be one of the
huge,
worst.
huge level of variance, and that makes so much sense because he's changing quarterbacks too. He's changing offenses. So there's so much uncertainty that adds on to just that. This is just looking at age and how tradition has gone with the position. If you add in the other variables, oh my goodness, the uncertainty of what you're buying with that top draft pick is a little scary versus, I mean, look at how compact a guy like Juwan Johnson is.
Yeah.
He's likely to be lower than a lot of these guys.
Right.
But the total variance of what you could be getting is pretty compact for a guy who's going to be very affordable to draft. So I love looking at this data in this way because it gives you 3 or 4 guys that might
especially
have
in streaming, Dennis.
Oh
You can
yeah.
pick your streamers.
Yes.
And remember,
Yes.
folks, if everybody, if Kincaid hits his top and everybody hits their top, that's probably, you know, Bowers and McBride are pretty much priced. But here's your bargain, Juwan Johnson, if he hits his top. Look at Tyler Warren. Now, if Johnson drops and Tyler Warren hits his top, then Tyler's worth a 3. But then you have Kittle, if he hits his top, could be as valuable as Bowers. You see, so you can start and look at some of these if they hit their top. So our trick is to decide how good your track record is. Have you picked the right tight end in the past at their tops and you were right about it? Versus look at the bottoms. This could notice this is just crazy because look at all the variation, Dennis, that we could end up.
Yep.
This is a warning to me seeing now what we're going to do. Dennis and I are going to put the the Bush LR, and his MVP, and we're going to make a lollipop graph of those 3. And that's what we used last year as our cheat sheet. And we'll get an interesting situation, and we'll see where the variation is versus ADP. So we'll have a guesstimate of the floor and ceiling using our consistency. Again, we're not saying that's going to be the final answer, but it will be closer to the final answer than we have now.
What you're doing with this concept is you're trying to define a starting point for a player's
thinking in
variance.
probability.
You're thinking in probabilities, and then, like I said, you know, Trey McBride is my top-rated tight end going into the season, and he's there for a reason. But when I look at every player in fantasy football, it doesn't matter if he is your top-rated guy. For instance, Jamar Chase last year was my top-rated wide receiver.
Yep.
And I had a hard time pulling the trigger at pick number 1 because I said he's got 2 different injury situations that concern me.
Mm-hmm.
With Trey McBride, when we look at just the data for Trey McBride compared to what other tight ends have done in the past,
right,
you get this lollipop.
Yep.
Now, if I add in the fact that Marvin Harrison comes back healthy, right, Michael Wilson with another year of experience after stepping up at the end of the year,
right,
I look at a different running back being added to the mix. Last year, they couldn't stay healthy. Look at a new quarterback. Look at a new head coach and offensive coordinator. Each one of those levels of uncertainty pulls on this data even greater. Or it indicates that the red mark might be the more logical point than the high point.
Yeah.
So all of that data goes into the mix and makes me a little bit more concerned about Trey McBride than I would have been otherwise. I look on the flip side of it, and Brock Bowers comes back healthy on a better offense. Maybe he's going to hit that high mark of his lollipop.
But like I said, the price for Juwan Johnson or
Ooh,
Warren
very
or
apparent.
Kittle
Yep.
is cheaper than
And,
these
and,
guys.
and Kittle has that added problem of coming off of a major injury late in the year. So when will he be healthy?
Right.
That's the
Well, we'll
concern
know
there.
by August.
We'll know by August.
Yeah.
But look at Zach Ertz back with the Commanders,
He could be
and he could
good
be awesome.
times or he could be bad times.
Yeah, and even his worst times, if I had him
Kelsey,
at
him and Kelsey and almost Hunter Henry is the same guy in
the
some
same guy.
ways.
So we go
They could be,
shopping,
think about it. If everybody hits their bottom except these three, they could be one of them could be number one. How about that
and,
first? I mean, I know it's probably not going to happen, but that's in the range of possibilities.
and another player that I'll look at and show the range. So Kyle Pitts, for
Look at him.
understandably, has
He
a
could tower
huge,
over all of them,
and
or he could be another bust.
let's say they get good quarterback play,
Yeah.
and they
Then you're
changed
starting
to
to get closer up here.
and they changed head coach and offensive coordinator to two guys who lean on the tight end position.
Right.
So all of the data, the data gives you one look at where the range of outcomes are, and then looking at the changes on the team level
Yeah.
lets you know then whether you're more likely to be higher, lower, or mid range in the range. And
Right.
sometimes maybe there's so much negativity or so much positivity that you could elongate the top or bottom of this chart.
Yep.
But the key is this gives us a great starting point just based on the data before we look at injuries, before we look at changes.
And
This is
price.
in price. This gives you an idea of what the value of a player will be compared to the rest of the league. Adding in ADP, now I know his price tag to go with that potential. And the more I look at this, like I said earlier, I said on our other podcast earlier today, Juwan Johnson, for a lot of reasons, there's a lot of things going on with the Saints that has me looking at Juwan Johnson even closer, and this data is certainly going to back that up.
Yeah. So, Dennis, we will do wide receivers just like I did here. And I've skipped a lot of the data, folks, but anyway, and but we'll do wide receivers and then probably Dennis, we should relook at all the positional lollipops again in before I head out to Hawaii. Uh, to kind of put it all together in the perspective. And I look forward to the MVP metric and the Bush LR to try to, maybe even get closer to, our our final paper, our final solution that we're going to be using with other mystery metrics to make our final selections here.
Fascinating data as always, Professor. It's a unique way of looking at fantasy football data that nobody else is
I've never
doing.
seen any of this. Nobody's even thinking about it that I can see.
And how a player ages in the NFL, it's been fascinating to look at this data, and I'll be sending you my MVP data
Yeah.
for players so you can do the
I'll
same
start, we can
sort of
start
treatment.
mixing our yeah, we'll have fun with that.
Very good stuff. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You can check out the articles from the professor and I, and also the professor's videos to better understand what he means when he talks about counts over median, although that's pretty simple, folks.
Yep.
It's a median, it's a count above
It's
the
the
median.
weeks over median that
And
they've scored.
that's where you want to be living
Yeah,
in fantasy
in the
football
whisker above that. Yeah.
each and every week. And head on over to the Science of Fantasy Football. Check out our sister podcast, The Science of Fantasy Football, and also check out all of the great stuff here at the Sports Affiliation. And come on back here next week for another edition of the Data Lab.
Get to work, folks.